I paid $125 a month for financial advice, and at the age of 26, with less than $50,000 of my net worth, you would think that it wouldn't be that crucial for me, but I can show you why I'm paying for it and how it made sure that I am starting my financial journey right in the correct direction. Hey guys, it's Kerry, and last week I told you about the business venture that I have with Rick sitting right over there, and how it is the portable chargers of vending machines, and I spent $15,000 on it just to only make $68 in net revenue, and a hard lesson I had to learn about me not liking sales. As I mentioned in the video towards the end, the financial advisor told me to not use my own personal money to keep funding this business, and this week I'll just get into how I went from having a tax preparer to having a full financial advisory relationship. As usual, I'll be upfront and honest with you guys about everything I got going on here. So with the financial advisors, we're still fairly new into our relationship, and honestly my life has just been changing so fast since I've started working with them that it's really been reactive type of lessons between us rather than proactive. And obviously my life will settle down at some point, but even then I kind of already have my own financial plans going, as you can see from the other videos that we had, and it's nice to be able to at least talk with them and explain those things that are going on actively right now and just get validation that I am still on the right path and these things are not obviously going to derail me in the future. This is something I really find that's really valuable to me, to make sure that I am not digging myself in a hole thinking I'm doing myself a favor. To elaborate on how this relationship originated, I want to go ahead and take us back to really like early 2024 when I was doing my 2023 taxes. My mom referred me to a tax advisor because I didn't want to use Intuit anymore. So I ended up reaching out to him. He did my taxes in that year for 2024. And then we said something that kind of stuck with me because he was looking at my taxes and realized how much I paid in taxes. He's like, man, you are paying a lot in taxes to only be 24 years old. So I'm like, you need to just kind of think and look over these. And I was like, oh, I guess that makes sense. And I started looking at it. I didn't even think about it. I have the option to lower my taxes at some point by doing other activities that are incentivized by the government, rather than just being like, I can always lower my spending to be able to save more for my financial freedom, right? And it was interesting because it just opened my eyes up to so many questions. I'm sitting there like, so how do I lower my tax burden? Like, am I missing something? What strategies are out there that I don't know about? And it just made me kind of realize like filing taxes season is also another way for me to look at how much I'm spending, not just from my daily life, but how much I'm giving away to the government. One of the first things that he ended up doing for me after the taxes, after I ended up talking with him, is I was asking him about one thing. It's like, I've always seen that the rich are able to borrow money rather than liquidate their stocks or even have to use cash to be able to make big purchases. And I'm always wondering, like, for myself, I always thought that was locked away to the rich because there's no way for me to have cash that somebody will borrow against if it's not a big enough amount. And I was always trying to figure out, how do I leverage my money in that way? And around the spring of 2024 is when I brought this to the same guy, Mr. Tony, and he introduced me to something called an IUL, which is an index universal life insurance policy. Little did I know this was the actual tool that I was looking for to do exactly what I just said. An IUL is a type of permanent life insurance policy that has a cash value component to it. So the way it works is part of your monthly premium goes towards just the cost of insurance, and the cost of insurance is basically saying, we're insuring you for a death benefit of X. We're gonna charge you X amount for insuring you for this death benefit, and then the remainder goes towards the cash value account. And the cash value account is not actually directly into the stock market. It's actually indexed into the stock market, and that's the key here, because I'm gonna introduce you to two more concepts, which is a ceiling and a floor. The floor is the part on the minimum that you will make when the insurance pays out, and then the ceiling is the maximum that you'll make when the insurance pays out. So because it's tied to the stock market, it depends on that. So if the stock market returns 5%, then and the ceiling is 10% and the floor is 0%, then you're going to get that 5%. But if the stock market returns 15% and the ceiling is 10%, you're only going to get that 10%. The other way, if the market returns negative 15%, you're still going to make sure to get that 0%. And most insurance policies are going to have a 0% floor with around a 10 to 12% ceiling. And some policies actually allow you to have a 1% floor that guarantees you at least 1% every single year. So the reason they have those caps is because that's also the insurance side, right? Like, it protects you from the downside, but on the flip side of that, there is a cost that's associated with it, to whether if the market goes above that, then the insurance gets to keep the rest of that. But in my mind, I like this because it protects me from the downside, and it also adds to the part of the cash value, because now you can borrow from the cash value. The reason that is because the cash value is never going to go a lower amount, because you're protected by the at least 0% floor that you'll have on your money. And that's why we say it's index. Another reason I'll say it's index as well is because the minimum amount of time that they'll pay out is actually after a year. So I've seen like a year, 3 years, 5 years. There's different increments that they will pay out. The way it works is like, it's either the average, I'm not sure, I have to do my research on, but it's either the average or the actual close price during the day that it's paying out, and then they'll pay you whatever the percentage is that we went over before, and that becomes part of your cash value, and that can grow over time. But you can also, like I said, borrow against it. So when you borrow against it, the money that's in that cash value account is actually not touched unless you do a withdrawal, which I never recommend if you can always leverage your money. So you can pull from the you can borrow from the cash value, and when you borrow from the cash value, they'll charge you a certain interest, but all of the money that you borrowed is not pulling from the cash value. It's actually sitting on its own and still earning the same amount as if you never touched it. And they'll charge you, let's say 5%, but if the market returns 7%, then for that term or that time, you're actually making still a 2% difference, even though you borrowed that money. Because normally, traditionally, right, I would have to sell off my stock, take capital gains or capital losses, so either reduces or add tax, and then be able to pay for that, or just lose all the opportunity cost on being able to have that money in any type of market and just sell cash. So this is the thing that was really beneficial to me, and the thing I was looking for in this tool. The one other thing I want to caution about it is because there's always limits to everything. The life insurance, the IUL, actually not even a life insurance policy, but the IUL itself has a limit on how much you can actually put in there. If you put too much in there, that's more than what the IRS allows. It turns into a MEC, which it's called a modified endowed contract, in which now any money that's in there is taxable. Any loans or withdrawals are also taxable. So the one thing I forgot to mention earlier is that in the IUL, the money grows tax-free. You can borrow from it tax-free unless you make it a modified endowed contract or a MEC. So it's one of the things I wanted to warn you about. Your financial advisor or whoever sets you up with this policy is normally able to help you prevent from triggering this type of change on your policy, and it's something that I just want to make sure that you're aware of, because everything has limits, and I don't want people to go out there and misunderstand, thinking that they can move all of their money over at once into the life insurance policy. So I'll also move on to why I typically went with this. Obviously, there is a way for me to be able to borrow my own money, which is the number one goal, but this also gives me the opportunity to have life insurance at the same time. For me, at the time when I got this policy, I only had my one home at the time. The home was for $330,000, so I went ahead and got a policy for $330,000. So in case anything happens to me, at least the one physical appreciating asset that I do have will be covered and still be able to be passed down to whoever I make as my beneficiary, and at that time it would have been my brother, and just making sure that that's covered. And at the same time, it's not too expensive for me. So the $330,000 death benefit had a $300 a month premium, which was very well affordable to me. And it's something that as soon as I put this money in here, a certain percentage of it I will be able to borrow later as well. So it just really worked out for me. And it's just one of the first things that I really talked with Mr. Tony about that really changed something that I just wouldn't have been able to do on my own. Fast forwarding to earlier 2025, and I did my 2024 taxes with him as usual. This time at the rental property, we already talked about this, but I got solar panels and you got the 30% tax credit. So he helped me get that. And this is where I just keep asking more questions. And he ended up sending me this book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, which was an interesting read for me. And it also shifted my mindset once again to focus on assets, liabilities, and then just making money work for me instead of trying to work hard for money. And our conversations really got deeper over time, and it was, some about taxes, but now it's about how do I build wealth for my family. And I was just asking detailed questions. I remember to the point I literally look back at our text message, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of words I put in here, because I'm trying to get specific on my financial situation. And it was to the point where he's like, I really recommend you to start this service with us, like me and my partner, Mr. Williams. Williams, we do financial planning for our clients, and you don't need to be a high net worth individual. He was like, I think this is something that really would benefit you, a comprehensive plan rather than us just talking here and there. And what ended up happening is like around June, I ended up becoming a client in June of 2025. I became an official client of their advisory practice. And then I met with him and Mr. Williams, and we did a fee structure of $125 a month. And the way it was structured was like this to enable them to be able to run their business, but not have to rely on me having such a high net worth or assets under management is what they call it, that they can pull from to fund themselves from the earnings of growing their clients' portfolios. And it was really awesome because I think this is a great way to be able to serve clients who are at that beginning phase and eventually transition us out into that phase where they can do assets under management, because right now they know that we're not going to have that, but the goal is to get us to that point where we can transition so we don't have to pay upfront for this type of service. Now on to the things that they recommended me to do as soon as we got in the door and I got my first few introductory meetings out the way. They was like, I know you've been with your first property, you got the IUL going, and you've got your brick business as well, but you are doing a lot of things financially and you are taking a huge risk right now, and that is because you do not have a properly funded emergency fund. And I was like, well, I have about like 20,000 saved, and that's going to get me through about 4 months. And it was like, yeah, with you being by yourself, we recommend you to have at least 12 months of savings, because we have plenty of clients that thought 4 months was enough, thought 6 months was enough, thought 8 months was enough, and we've seen their plans get completely derailed because they didn't have a long enough runway with their emergency fund. So that ended up putting me at a target of 48,000. And in my head, I'm like, oh my goodness, that is a lot of money. But at the same time, I trust them and understand that I'd rather be safe than sorry. That's the time I started working towards that $48,000 goal. It took time, but it was a clear change in behavior where I needed to focus on ensuring that that emergency fund is actually funded and not putting everything else before. Fast forward to November 10th of 2025. I'm at a courthouse and I with this beautiful partner, and we get married at the courthouse. And now this is a life-change event that we have to go back to the financial advisors, and I got to go tell them that, I'm now married and we need to change our financial plans. Of course, they had a little bit of warning, but now it's official. And it was interesting because now when I talk with them, because I have two sources of income coming into the house, now they say we can lower the emergency fund down to 6 months. Ironically, when we did that, our expenses together still totaled around $48,000 for the emergency fund. But the good thing here is that she was already saving, and I myself was still saving towards the time, and we were a lot closer. But we also piled another thing onto them. We are going to have a public wedding on July 4th of 2026. So we wanted to save up for that, and that goal was $25,000. They supported our goal of saying we should probably save for the wedding now. That way we can go ahead and have the money that we need and not need to borrow money to fund this wedding. And that's one of the things we really did, was just sit down and really just try to hammer out the money that we needed to save up for the wedding. And I mean, it was very aggressive. We were saving $3,099. I don't know why I can't get that word out, but essentially we were saving $3,099 to a month to be able to save up for this wedding fund. And I'm glad to report, as of February this month, we have the $25,000 fully funded. It was a great check to get off of our shoulders, and now we are focusing back on our emergency fund. I believe we looked at it a couple of days ago. Our emergency fund is probably sitting at around $32,000, so we are a long way from $48,000, but we're hoping to be able to start saving aggressively there. Not as aggressive at the wedding, because I'm not gonna lie, $3,000 a month is a little high, but it was something that kind of keeps shifting. And as you can see, our financial plan keeps shifting as we are trying to get things settled. And it was one of the things where I just wanted to make sure, as we're talking with the financial advisors, that this is something that's okay to do and not derail us from our financial goals in the future. With the emergency fund, we wanted to change pace a little bit to not be spending as much as the $3,099. Probably cut it back a little bit to allow us a little bit more breathing room. And we will hopefully be able to finish that up mid-March. And then after that, we're going to tackle high interest debt while our financial planners catch up to our ever-changing life that's finally going to hopefully settle down at that point. The plan keeps evolving, but it's just so interesting to see how these things plan out over time. But it's nice to at least know that what we're doing so far and the plans that we have so far is good to keep us on track while we are getting our plan put together by our financial advisors. I want to go ahead and talk about the business advice they gave me for Brick, because I wanted to go ahead and revitalize the business and get it off the ground, because it was getting closer towards the end of the year and I was like, I need to go ahead and get this thing rolling, because I don't want to pay another $3,000 and just have this company sit here for the third year and not really have much traction. And the one advice that they gave me is like, you're making money from a client right now that's paying you $3,000 a month to do web development for their particular application. Why not take that money to go ahead and fund Brick and limit yourself on how much you want to use to get Brick revitalized and back going by how much you're able to actually sustain from that client? And in my eyes, it's like, that makes so much sense, because now I'm not putting my financial plan at risk, like my personal financial plan. The business is just bonus on top if that gets rolling, but I'm not going to miss the $3,000 coming in from my business because I'm not depending on it in my financial plan right now. It's one of the things where I'm using my time to be able to help build assets for me as investments in the future. But the money I'm making from my job today and the investments that I'm doing today are for my financial plan and should be protected from any windfalls that are coming from the riskier side of business. Ironically, I was kind of already doing this because my freelancing, which is for the web client, my freelancing account and my Brick business account was sharing the same bank account. So because of that, the money that I was getting from my client was sitting in the same bank account that was funding Brick, but it also gave me a reason to not spend too much to get Brick revitalized and just limit myself to that amount of money that I have going on there. And for any other adventures that I want to do, for example, starting this channel, I'm using an editor, and for him, I'm paying him out of this money as well. And it's all protecting me from overexposing all of this stuff that I'm trying to do business-wise into my personal savings. The last thing I want to get into for this episode is just the value that the financial advisors brought me. I get to pay $125 a month, and I have access to like monthly meetings, and if there's an emergency I can always call as needed. Someone who actually has my full financial picture, as well as just advice for my specific situation and not generic tips that I go find on YouTube. Not that those are bad, but it's always nice to have somebody who has professional opinions about what you got specifically going on, and they know exactly what you have going on in your situation, and they also are able to hold me accountable. The other thing that I will say as well is I have the financial dashboard tool that's called Right Capital that they use, where I can sync all my bank accounts. They can set a budget for me to follow, and they can actually see if I'm hitting the budget or not. And then it also shows like the projected tax liabilities, I don't know why I say project, the net worth tracking, the life insurance coverage, the retirement projections, property insurance, auto insurance, umbrella insurance, investment tracking, and tax allocations, all together in one convenient little place. So to me, it's like having a financial health dashboard that I can easily go and see. I had it all set up when it was just me, but as soon as my spouse got on there, things changed. We need to still wrap up the dashboard to have all the correct data for that. But once it's set up, it's a really good tool. I'm just really excited to hopefully get that back into shape pretty soon. And it's been interesting because with that tool and what they're providing me, they've also been able to cover several things that we talked about earlier, even though my life is I wouldn't say in flux, but I definitely got a lot of moving changes going on. We were able to cover emergency fund strategy, the wedding savings prioritization, the business funding principles that I'm going to have from now on, my insurance as well. And the insurance is done before I even became a client, so I'm always appreciative of that. And then the debt payoff sequencing as well. And then we're still also building a financial plan that they are also able to give me advice as they're building the plan together, because obviously they don't want me going off track before they even get a chance to write a plan down, because that changes the plan again. The other thing I'll get into a little bit more in detail is the disability insurance. And that's because my financial advisors pointed out, and rightfully so, that the disability insurance for your job is typically not 100%. So if I were to get sick, get into a car accident or anything like that, where I can no longer work for my company because of my physical condition, then they would only cover 60% of my income income, and I don't want to lose 40% of my income, and I'm already having to deal with a health issue. So my advisor helped me get that 40%, and it only cost me $24.45 a month. And it's definitely something that gives us a little bit more peace of mind. Same thing kind of with the life insurance. If something happens, my one home is at least covered. And speaking of peace of mind, like for me, it's really interesting because it gives me peace of mind just having a financial professional there to ensure that I'm doing things on the right track. Because I can ideate all day long, but it is a huge risk in my head to try to do these plans and try to just go ahead and just run with the plan without having somebody who's actually professionally qualified to just go ahead and say like, yeah, this makes sense. This will be okay to do in the long run. It won't hurt your financial future. And it's just, I think it's always worth, no matter what your net worth is, to have a financial advisor to kind of help keep you on track. And speaking of that, if you want to connect with the financial advisor that I'm using, his name is Zio Williams at Leo Wealth. The person that introduced me that was a tax preparer is Tony Howard. I'll leave Zio Williams' contact, his QR code on the screen, and then I'll also put it in the YouTube description for those that are interested. You know, it's just really one of the things that I always want to make sure you guys have access to things that I'm using, and that you are able to go ahead and reach out, because this is one of the things where they poured into me before I even became a client, and I just always want to show appreciation for that. So on to next week, and what we have coming up for next week is we're going to get back into real estate again, and I'm going to show you how I got into this home and how this home tied into my first web client as well. And the web client episode will be coming after the home episode as well. And just pretty excited to really just show you guys the next part of my journey. And as usual, I appreciate you for watching. If you've actually had your own financial advisors, what advice have they gave you? I'm pretty early into mine, but I'm also curious for other people. Do you feel like it's ever too early to have a financial advisor? If so, actually tell me why. If not, also tell me why. And as usual, I'll see you guys next week. Nick's Financial Journey YouTube channel. Peace out.